It's time for the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. The podcast you look forward to for all of your news and reviews of the best comic books hitting stands. Whether it's DC,
Batman, Wonder Woman,
Marvel,
Spider-Man,
Image,
Spawn, Saga,
Boom,
Once and Future, Power Rangers,
or whatever book or publisher you follow,
we cover them all here.
this is the place for you.
That's right, it's for everyone.
This is the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
Let's get it.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I am your host, Theo. Got a special episode this time around. Special because, yes, we are here on YouTube. We're doing our very first fully video format of the podcast, and I'm quite excited about it, and quite excited about the reason for doing it. If you can remember, a few months ago, I sat down, talked with Joshua Williamson about Duke and G.I. Joe's official introduction into the Energon universe. Well, Josh is back, and this time he's back with artist Tom Reilly, and the three of us sat down to talk about G.I. Joe number 1. G.I. Joe number 1 will be on bookshelves this coming Wednesday, and if you haven't pre-ordered your copy yet, I strongly suggest that you head to your local comic shop on Wednesday to pick up a copy. You're really going to be in for a doozy. I had the opportunity to read it, including finally the last 2 pages, which were initially redacted from the comic book press when it was released for us to begin reviewing the issue. I finally was able to see it, and you know it's going to be a doozy when you get to the end. But again, I hope you enjoyed this interview. I truly enjoyed it. It was a good experience sitting down this time with Tom as well, just to get his ideas on how he does his work drawing on the art, and just excited about it. I'm excited about everything that's been going on with the Energon universe. And as you all know, Void Rivals has been my favorite book on the shelves up to this point. So I'm just excited to see now G.I. Joe really go full blown now that all of the miniseries are over. So after that is done, I'm going to come back. I'm going to talk a little bit about my favorite books from this past week. If you're following me on social media, you kind of know I kind of leaked what my book of the week is already. But here it is, my interview with Tom Reilly and Joshua Williamson, talking about G.I. Joe number 1 out this Wednesday on bookshelves. And I will see you on the other side. Hey folks, it's Theo here at the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I am sitting here with the great Joshua Williamson. Josh, welcome back to the show. Nice to have you back.
Yeah, nice to see you again.
So last time we talked Duke and Duke number 1. We're now it's time. 2 weeks now. It's G.I. Joe number 1 from you and from there he is, our good friend Tom Reilly. Hey Tom,
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, I forgot how to use Zoom for a second.
That's quite okay. It eventually it's going to be ingrained in everybody.
Yes.
So we have Duke number 1 that came out last time Joshua and I talked, and now here it is, November 13th. We have G.I. Joe. So we've had all of the introductory miniseries with Destro and Cobra Commander and Scarlet. It's now on you guys. How you feeling? How you feeling about the excitement of just everything with G.I. Joe and the Energon universe?
I mean, it's really great. You know, people, when we were at New York Comic Con, like, really came up to the table. They're all really happy and excited. We did a signing in Midtown. That went really well. The panel was packed. It was like, you know, we had to basically cut the line off, I think, to get into the panel that we did at New York Comic Con, which is always a good sign. You know, it's like nice to know there's like no empty seats. Like everybody's just really feeling it. It's great, dude. It's super surreal at times because we've been talking about this. I mean, I know I've been talking to Skybound. I think I said this last time we talked. I've been talking to Skybound about this for like maybe 6 years. So it's like to finally be here has been, it's super awesome. I don't know. I love writing it. So it's been, yeah, it's surreal, but it's good. Yeah. Tom, how about you, dude?
I'm excited to see what people think. A little nervous, you know, because this is a big book. So I'm excited to see what people think. We've spent a lot of time working on it. with
Yeah.
the team, everyone at Skybound. So I just want people to get it in their hands, and I want to hear what they think about it.
Yeah.
So, for the folks who may still somehow be new to the Energon universe, as a matter of fact, I was in a conversation on Reddit early this morning, like 1,
Uh-huh.
2 o'clock this morning, and when the word Energon was mentioned, the first thing that came to everybody's mind was Transformers, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no, there's a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
And when I mentioned G.I. Joe, of course, the first thing that pops in everybody's mind is Real American Hero from Larry Hama.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, for those who may still not know, what is the Energon universe? What is this partnership between Skybound and Hasbro, and how did you guys get involved in it?
So for me, 6 years ago, Sean Makowitz, who's publisher of Skybound, he called me and we started talking about licensed books. And at the time, they didn't really do licensed books. They mostly were focused on doing creator own or Roberts properties, And so we went on some original properties. And so and I had worked with them already with Ghosted and Birthright and then Darkrai. But we were talking a bunch about different ideas. And I was like, oh, I'm never doing a licensed book again. I'm never doing that again. And then I was like, oh, but there's like five. Like I have like five books I would maybe do. And number one on that list was G.I. Joe. And Sean was like, oh, interesting. And so we started talking about it then. At the time, I didn't really know how much they had planned or what they were doing. I didn't realize they were putting together their own massive plan, And so we kept talking about it over the years. And then eventually they came to me and they said, all right, here's the idea. We're going to do a big, basically crossover universe, like start from the beginning, start from the very beginning. I don't want to use the word reboot because that's the thing is that like there's still going to be the Real American Hero series by Larry Hama, which was actually one of the first questions I asked. I'm like, what happens with that? Like, you have to keep that going. Like, no, we're going to keep that going, but we also want to make something that's new and accessible and tries to tackle both sides, like make sure the hardcore fans are happy, but also try to appeal to a new audience, right? And try to bring them into this. And honestly, for a side with that, like that's one of the best parts of this has been watching the amount of people who are like, I was never a G.I. Joe fan. And now they're like hardcore into it. And now they're buying toys. Like now they're getting into it because of the Energon universe. And so what we did was we basically built a brand new world in which these three books, like Void Rivals, Transformers, G.I. Joe, are essentially coexisting. But because they're coexisting from the very beginning, it changes the narrative of those worlds, right? So it's like, how is G.I. Joe different if it was created as a result of Transformers, right? And so how is it different if Cobra was created because, like, in the very beginning, the Cobra Law played a major part, but also Energon, and how Energon almost plays like the MacGuffin of this universe, right? It's like the hot commodity that everyone needs and wants. The Cobra Commander is after, and that you have obviously it plays an important role to the Transformers, the Autobots, and Decepticons. How does that world look different? And start from that. But again, it was really just about starting from the beginning and telling a new story that was a bit more modern with all of these elements at play. And that's what we've been working on. So the Energon universe consists of those three books at this exact moment. It's Void Rivals that Robert's doing with Lorenzo. It's Transformers Daniel Warren Johnson started. And then now what we're doing with G.I. Joe with me and Tom. And we've just been building out this world a little differently than what you might expect. And I think that's a big piece too, is I think Energon Universe is always trying to not be predictable, and not follow the exact same path. Like we're not trying to retell what's already been told. We're trying to tell a new story with the same pieces, Yeah.
Yeah. And this
Go ahead.
This is not a crossover Transformers and G.I. Joe. It's happened before in the comics. So some people may think they know what they're in for, but it's exciting to get to try and tell a new story with sort of these familiar aspects. I think people are going to be surprised.
Yeah.
It's going to be cool.
And if you're a G.I. Joe fan and you haven't dived into it yet, I mean, I definitely think there's stuff for you in here. It's like we were saying, it's like we want to make sure that I was one of the first questions I asked when I was working on the outline. And when I started, I always work on outlines and write issue ones kind of at the same time. It helps me figure some stuff out, like actually getting into the world versus looking at it. Like, it's always funny because you look at these books when you're building out these big, like, franchise level book, which I've done a lot at DC at. You look at the big picture, but you also got to get in the mix yourself. You got to get in the trenches with it at the same time. And I've learned that always helps me write issue one, writing the outline. But that was one of the questions I had to Skybound. I was like, who's this for? Am I appealing to the hardcore? Am I appealing to the new? The audience that might not be familiar with it. And they were like, both. And I was like, oh, okay, so easy then. But like, here's the thing, like, I'm a big GI Joe fan. It's like I love this property. I have a ton of the toys here. I watch the cartoons all the time. I've got the comics, and it's been something that I never stopped being a fan of since I was a kid. Like, I was always paying attention to it. And I think we have a moment where there's definitely a resurgence of GI Joe interest right now. You can feel it. And so I'm trying to make sure that, like, we talk about this a lot. Robert and I talk about this a bit, where it's like we're making the comics that we want, right? What I mean by that is, like, me as a GI Joe fan, this is a book that I would want, right? Like, this is a book I would want to read. So I always try to make sure that people who are like the hardcore fans are interested in it and can still feel like it's for them. Like, we're definitely honoring what's come before and moving the ball forward, but at the same time, I'm really happy that, again, we've been able to get people who are new fans to come in. I mean, I'm telling you, like, hearing stories about people being like, I have never read anything. I don't know anything about G.I. Joe, and now I'm super into the Energon universe, and they're out here buying toys and stuff. Like, I'm like, that is such a win, dude. It's such a huge win.
So Tom, let me ask you this, because I asked Josh this question the last time we spoke. How is the relationship with Hasbro been for you? Because, again, as Joshua mentioned, you all are telling a story that really hasn't been told before, and we could talk about in Transformers, Bumblebee getting offed in the first issue.
Yeah.
We're seeing a Conrad Duke Hauser walking around with gruff and long hair, and so when it comes to your drawing style and how you're visualizing the script that Josh was given to you, how is the relationship with Hasbro?
It's really great. It is surprisingly great, because Hasbro is a toy company, and you see the toys that they're making. It's a visual, so they could have a lot of power over what the book looks like, because that's kind of like the whole point of buying a toy and stuff, is you're looking at it. They could easily tell me just to draw things and make them look like the toys that are on the shelves, just to kind of push more product. But
Right.
that is not what they're doing. I'm not really getting any pushback on anything I'm doing visually from Hasbro. They're very open to all the sorts of design choices I'm making. So I don't really have anything bad to say about it. It's been awesome.
They've been a really great partner, and they're super supportive of it, and it's really awesome to see how much they have, like, really embraced what we're doing. Like, they are fans too, and they're really, really happy with everything we're doing. I just did a video for 10/27, which is like a big Hasbro celebration that they did on Sunday. They do every year. And they had me on as a guest speaker to talk to Lenny, who designs all those toys, who's like the lead designer for all that, to be able to sit and, like, and he's a big fan of what we're doing, right? And so to sit there and talk about Nemesis Immortal and talk about how, we use his design in the comics, but he is super supportive of, like, what we're doing, and it's just been, yeah, dude, it's so funny, like, in terms of, like, notes and stuff. I don't want to jinx us, but it's been great. And there are times where they will essentially just be like, hey, like, they'll double check us on things like ranks every once in a while. Like, it's been dude, I don't know, I don't want to jinx us and overstate it, but they've been a really fabulous partner for us. It's been awesome.
And so now there is a third part to this visual team with Jody Belair on colors.
Yeah.
How has it been working with that person? I mean, with Jody, she absolutely loved everything that just.
Oh yeah. Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead. You.
I mean, I've worked with Jordy for several things before G.I. Joe and Duke, so I know how good she is. She's one of the best in the game, reigning Eisner champ for best colorist. So what's interesting to me is that every time we work together, she has a different approach to the colors for the book. If you look at anything we've done, we did like The Thing together with Walter Mosley. We did the Ant-Man series. We did like some other Marvel stuff. and then Duke and G.I. Joe, every single book looks different. So she could easily just do everything kind of the same way and it would look amazing. But she puts a lot of thought and intention into the choices that she makes for each story. So, and even Duke looks a little bit different than G.I. Joe. There's like a bit of a difference. So,
Yeah.
And that's in like the same line of stories. She does a lot of great things. She elevates the book. I think that she sells copies of the book for sure. Having her name on the book is like getting people interested in it too.
Yeah.
It's another level of trust I think that readers have when they see Jordy's name on stuff. You know, I think that they definitely, it's like I don't know, it's an air of prestige, I think, to a book when Jordy works on it. You know, and it was awesome with like Duke. It was like she really set a lot of the tone and definitely helped elevate the story in places. And like once we got going on Duke, it was very clear, like, oh, okay, we know where this is gonna be. And then when she came on to do G.I. Joe, you know, it's like you said, she sort of tweaked things a little bit. Like she sort of again elevated it, and she's very thoughtful about everything. And you know, I've talked about this with Tom as well, a lot, where it's like I'm really always happy working with people. You can tell they're being incredibly thoughtful with the pages. They're really thoughtful what they're doing. They're not just trying to like rush through the story. They're actually telling the story. And I think that's the thing that like Tom and Jordy as a team do incredibly well together. Like, you know, we talk about like, Tom, you got those roughs that you turned in last week. And I was just sitting there with Ben Abernathy, who's executive editor of Skybound, and we were having a beer together at a bar when the roughs came in.
Got to be awesome to have to sit with the executive editor drinking a beer at the bar.
Oh yeah. I'm funny, man, every once in a while. But I mean, I've known Ben for 20 years, so it's like we've been buddies this whole time. So it's not like you know, I'm glad that he's here now with me. It's like I went from working with him on Batman and Robin and Green Arrow to G.I. Joe. It was like the next day, you know. So I've known Ben for a really long time. But yeah, so we were sitting there and Tom turned in some roughs and we were just like going through them, and I was just talking about how like, yeah, Tom is so incredibly thoughtful and really puts a lot of thought and work into each page and really trying to amp up everything we're doing. But it's like, it's funny because it's like, you can tell it's like, I don't know how to explain this, but it's like comic pages, you know, it's like you really are thinking about each page. And yeah, it's awesome. Like it's really great, man. Yeah, I love it.
So I want to be respectful of time because we're coming up short. So yep. Skybound just recently had a Kickstarter campaign for the Real American Hero side. They did a compendium, and the question was asked of readers and the backers: Team Joe, Team Cobra. Tom, which are you?
I'm going Team Joe. I know Josh's answer, so I'm going Team Joe.
I'm definitely Team Cobra. Like I have always been like a Cobra kid, and Cobra Commander is like one of my favorite characters of all time. I have a Cobra Commander toy on my desk right now with like he's totally surrounded by a bunch of Cobra soldiers. Like I have the Valkyries, and even just yesterday, dude, I got a box with like 5 Cobra troops in it for troop building. So it's like I've always leaned a little harder Cobra than Joe's. I just find them to be such a. It was funny like that love of Cobra and my thoughts on how Cobra works and like why all of these obviously different factions, we talked about this, all these different factions sort of work on a Cobra Commander even though they hate them, was something that bugged me for years. And so that was one of my first things I said when I got the job was like, hey, I got to explore this because it drives me crazy that they're all together. I think they should actually be a little more separate at first and like watch it build. But yeah, I'm definitely a Cobra dude. You should see, I have so many Cobra toys in this office. It's crazy. I have a good amount of G.I. Joe toys too, but yeah, the amount of Cobra stuff is a little nuts. I just find them to be they're so cool visually. I don't know, but yeah, Cobra Commander. Yeah, I got this one.
They're very fun to draw. Yeah,
they're awesome. Cobra guys. I got this one right here where he has the globe with the snake on it around his hand on my desk. It's the one that came with his tank. Is this one?
He's a great character. Just as evil as he is, he's a great character. You know.
Yeah, exactly. He's very interesting to write, and I think, you know, with the book, we've talked about this. It's like always trying to find what the Energon universe version is of these characters, right? Because again, we're not trying to retell what's come before, but it's like with Cobra Commander, I think Robert said it early on where he was like, "Oh, I don't want Cobra Commander to retreat. I want someone else to retreat," and then Cobra Commander shoots him in the head, and that's what he did in the first issue. And it was like that was like the death of that version of Cobra Commander to me. And this is one that doesn't retreat, and like that small change, like that small change of like this is a Cobra Commander is not a coward. It's a small change, but it really changes the character in a lot of ways, right? And so it makes him much more interesting in story. To me at least, to write this version of him that's like, no, he does not retreat. He's too smart for that, too cunning, too dangerous, too it's funny sometimes. I'll call him a psycho. Sometimes Skybound will be like, he's not a psycho, and I'm like, no, he's a psycho.
he's still that egotistical prick that we've known Cobra Commander to always be. He can never be wrong, and if he is wrong, it's your fault that I'm wrong. And
your fault.
I gotta take you out for it.
Yeah, exactly. You messed up. So it's like, but yeah, having him be the one that's a little bit more dangerous has been really fun. But same with Duke, like Duke does crazy stuff. It's like Duke never. It's funny, these like weird little changes, because it's like Duke. To me, I always like that line where he's like, "I'm a man of action." So I'm like, oh, Duke is always moving forward. He's always about action. He's always about acting. Like get going. He's always doing the thing. And at sometimes that might get him in trouble, which is part of the story. It's like none of these characters are who they are by the time, like, because that was something we talked about early on, is that like we didn't want it to be just a repeat. So that meant it can't just be like, oh, we're just G.I. Joe #1 is just straight up G.I. Joe versus Cobra. Like, it's just real simple. And it's like, no, there's lots that we have to get there in some places. And so Duke is still not like, I guess, Duke yet. He's still this broken person who's still a little impulsive and still hasn't quite become the leader yet. Like, he's still on his way there, which you see a little bit in the first issue where Hawk is talking to him. It's like he just hasn't quite got there to that stage yet. And so, we'll see how he gets to be that true leader as we go.
Yeah, and it's the same really for most of the team that's in the first issue. They're still not there yet. They're still not G.I. Joe. And I would assume over this first arc is where we see them grow to get there.
I mean, maybe longer, I think it's gonna be a while, because that's the thing. Like, we like to do things that are unexpected. I hate the phrase slow burn at this point, but I do think we're taking our time and we're being patient with how we get to some of this stuff. I think it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be a while before I feel like people are going to be like, oh, that's the team. But even then, it's like, there's going to be some curveballs coming in. It's like we have Risk coming on the team. He causes problems. We have Baroness on the team. She causes problems. Like, it's going to be a minute, I think, before we get to that. And even then, by the time we get there, listen, we're going to pull the rug out under everybody a few times. The moment you think things are stable, well, we got you again. So it's like, I think that's going to be a few. It's funny because, like, in my head, like, I know stuff that's coming like years down the line. It's like, I know what happens in 25, I know what happens in 30. So it's like, the path to get there, I think people are going to be surprised at times how different it's going to be, but still all within the spirit of what you love about G.I. Joe.
So I need one of you to sell the folks, because you don't need to sell me. Sell the folks on G.I. Joe. Josh, you sold them on Duke last time, so maybe Tom wants to sell them on G.I. Joe.
If you like Tom's art, you should buy this book.
I guess that would, I mean, it's my art, Jordy's colors, Josh's writing, Skybound, a company whose reputation for quality, I think, is evident. And it's just I'm trying to make a book that is fun, fun to look at. And Josh, it's fun to read, and just bombastic, sweet action, drama, kind of both within both teams, Cobra, G.I. Joe, and against Cobra versus G.I. Joe. I'm putting everything I got into the book, and it would make me happy if you checked it out.
Well, I've been enjoying it ever since Duke, and again, I've had the pleasure of reading issue #1 already, so I'm excited for the series. I'm excited for what you guys have prepared for us. Joshua Williamson, Tom Reilly, how can fans keep up with you if they want to follow what's going on?
I think for the most part, just follow me on Twitter or Instagram. On Twitter, it's Williamson_Josh. My assistant runs all this stuff, and he's always on top of posting up all the new stuff so people know what's coming out. on both of them. And then Instagram is just my name. It's just Josh Williamson, or Joshua Williamson, excuse me. But yeah, go on there and you'll see I'm always, my assistant always stays on top of making sure they know what books are coming out.
Shout out to Tyler. Yes.
Yeah, Tyler's awesome. Yeah.
And for me, it's the same. Instagram, Twitter. It's just Tom Reilly Art. And I'm just posting drawings, and I'll post, G.I. Joe panels, things like that. But that is where you can find me. And that's pretty much it.
The story is G.I. Joe, out on shelves November 13th. This is Joshua Williamson. This is Tom Reilly. Fellas, thank you so much for joining me on the Comic Ben Comic Book Podcast. I truly appreciate it.
Always a good time. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
So again, I want to thank Josh and Tom for sitting with me to talk about G.I. Joe #1. Again, it's on bookshelves this coming Wednesday. Again, if you haven't ordered your copy already, make sure you stop by your local comic shop and pick up a copy. I read it already, including those final 2 pages, which I had not done when the 3 of us talked. And if you know the folks at Skybound, you know that you are in for a doozy of an ending. So again, thanks to those folks. Thanks to Skybound for setting the 3 of us up so that we can discuss G.I. Joe #1. Again, very excited for that book to be released on Wednesday. With that being said, let's close things out with looking at my top 3 books of the week. All right, in the number 3 position, Birds of Prey #15 from DC Comics, written by Kelly Thompson with art by Sammy Basri. One real reason that I really enjoy this book is its focus on Cassandra Cain, and you'll notice a pattern with that. But in this issue, this is the second part, I believe, of the story arc. Cass has gone undercover to find some missing Amazons, and if you're following the solicits, you will notice that it will get a whole lot worse before it gets better for her. And she's all alone in this. The team was tracking her at the beginning, but they lose track of her, and of course it leaves Cass to do the things that Cass does. And I'm very excited, with the focus that's been given to Cass with this issue and with this story arc as we get through this continuation of the Birds of Prey series. It seems like Babs has been fully entrenched now as a member of the team. We see that they've added a few other members, but I'm just totally excited about the focus of this arc, focusing on Cassandra Cain and her doing the things that she's able to do. Art-wise, the art was really good in this issue. The covers were absolutely gems. I actually struggled trying to decide which one I wanted to pick up. I ended up going with the Serge Acuna variant cover, but it was just a very good story. I'm excited for this story arc, and again, it's I have been quite impressed with what DC has been doing with All In thus far. And to their credit, I will also say I've been quite impressed with what they're doing on the Absolute Universe side as well. I read Absolute Superman. If I was doing an honorable mention this week, Superman would be in there. It was a good read from Jason Aaron. But that's my number 3 book for the week, Birds of Prey #15. Written by Kelly Thompson with art by Sammy Basri over at DC Comics. Okay, in the number 2 spot, Public Domain #10, written and drawn by Chip Zdarsky over at Image Comics. So, if you can remember in the last issue, the big reveal was of Sid's wife and his editor, longtime editor, actually having an affair. And so in this issue, we kind of get that backstory. There's this backstory of the 2 of them meeting and getting close and just having a fling. And for her credit, Sid's wife wanted a little bit more. Cynthia did not. It was just quite a story, and you kind of see that the missus in the end kind of got left hanging because again she was looking for more, especially considering how Sid was just so entrenched with doing everything with the domain. And again, this has just been a crazy story from Chip Zdarsky. I've been loving the whole premise of public domain, and now the domain, which is actually going to be out this week on Wednesday as well. But can't go wrong with this story. Again, it just gives you can forget this story if you somehow miss it because again it just gives you backstory. But you'll see some other things in there that's in the present as Sid and his wife, discuss what happened and how things ended up being the way they are. But that is my number three. I'm sorry, my number two book of the week, Public Domain number 10, written and drawn by Chip Zdarsky over at Image Comics. All right, so again, if you follow me on social media, you already know what my number one book is. But if not, my number one book for the week is Batgirl number 1, written by Tate Brombo with art from Takeshi Miyazawa over at DC Comics. Oh my God. So if you read if you read Donovan's review of Batgirl number 1 over at the Batman universe, he mentioned how, originally he was the Cassandra Cain fan in TBU, and I'm gonna have to fight him over that because I am the Cassandra Cain fan at TBU now. She has been a favorite of mine since she made her first appearance back in No Man's Land. And I've picked up her series when she had her first solo series. After that, followed it ever since. But over the years, and as we got into current DC timeline, we see that a lot of stuff that Cass was known for has kind of been downgraded, been withered away. But what we see from Tate Brombo in Batgirl number 1 is just a return to form. We see Cassandra doing all of the stuff that just made me one of her biggest fans. And I absolutely loved what this story brought. And you could tell that Tate was really into this story as well. And I truly enjoyed everything that this creative team put together with this first issue. So this is a mother-daughter story. Shiva is reaching out to Cass to say, hey, folks are coming after you and I. They want us both dead. And Cassandra, to her credit, because of the tension that has always existed between her and Shiva, even before she found out that Lady Shiva was her mother, is still there. And, she recognizes her as her mother, but that's pretty much it until the end, when these assassins that are coming after them, kind of corner them. But again, if I had to give this a score, it would probably be a 9.5 out of 10. That's just how much I enjoyed it. So much so, I actually ordered every cover for this first issue. That's how big of a fan that I am of Cassandra Cain and her role as Batgirl. One of the things that really ticked me off with DC was when they brought Cassandra back and they brought her back as Orphan. That name was just terrible. I hated it, and I'm happy it's gone. And I wish when she came back they gave her the Black Bat name, but they didn't. They went with Orphan. They had their reasons. I didn't agree with it. A whole lot of folks didn't agree with it. But since being back at Batgirl, back as Batgirl, I've just been loving everything with Cassandra. If there was anything that I would change about her right now, will probably be the eyes, since she's been Batgirl in this new run of DC Comics. The all black that she has been known for, including the eyes, has been replaced with white. But if there was one thing that I would change, it would be that, bringing it back to black. But again, that's just a minor quip for me being an old timer who has been following this character from the moment that she made her first appearance back in No Man's Land. And I you could tell that Tate did a whole lot of research and really has a love for the lineage and the history of Cassandra, and I am so happy about that, and so pleased with this story that we got with this first issue. Can't wait for the second one. I'm hoping to one day meet and talk with Tate Bramble about what we can see from this series as it goes on. But I'm just over the moon just to have the focus on Cassandra Cain, especially considering she is celebrating her 25th anniversary in the DC universe. So that is my book of the week. And again, I'm just overjoyed to see her back on the cover with her own series once again. But again, that's my book of the week, Batgirl #1, written by Tate Bramble with art by Takeshi Miyazawa over at DC Comics. So that is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I want to thank you all for making this particular episode happen. Again, with it being our first fully recorded video episode. And again, thanks to Joshua Williamson and Tom Reilly for joining me, and the folks at Skybound for making it happen. Again, if you haven't ordered G.I. Joe #1, pick it up. I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy it. So, next week, what am I going to be doing next week? There's a ton of books that I'm going to be reading and prepping to do. So, first up, over at DC Comics, Absolute Batman #2 from Scott Snyder and Nick Dragotta. Action Comics #1075 from Mark Waid with art from Clayton Henry and Michael Shelfer. Then Batman and Robin #15 from Philip Kennedy Johnson with art from Javier Fernandez. I really hope the second issue of this new arc is better than the first one. I was not crazy about the first one. And then finally at DC, Black Lightning #1 from Brandon Thomas with art from Fico Ocio. I'm happy to see that Brandon Thomas is back at DC. I've been wanting Brandon Thomas to do something at DC since his last run doing these stories in the backup stories, whether in Urban Legends or Brave and the Bold, that involved the Batman and the Outsiders, particularly with the way that he wrote Duke Thomas. He made me a fan of the character. And so I'm happy to see that he's back on Black Lightning. And hopefully this Black Lightning is the same that has been under his pen before, again, doing those backup stories with Duke Thomas and the rest of the Outsiders. And hopefully we see Duke in this story. Then moving over to Marvel, Cyclops #1 from Alyssa Wong with art from Vincenzo Caruto. I think I said it right. First issue of this new series. I want to say there's 5 issues in this series, but it's spinning off again from the Ashes storyline with the X-Men coming out of the fall of Krakoa. Now, moving on over to Image Comics. First, under the Skybound imprint, the aforementioned G.I. Joe #1 from Joshua Williamson and Tom Reilly. Also, coming from Skybound, Transformers #14 from Daniel Warren Johnson with guest artist Jason Howard. Jorge Corona will be back. I want to say he's going to be back on issue 15, but we have a guest artist for this issue. Then moving over to Top Cow, Witchblade #5 from writer Marguerite Bennett with art from Giuseppe Cafaro. And then lastly, at Image Comics, we have The Domain #5 from Chip Zdarsky with art from Rachel Stott. Now, moving on over to AWA, still my favorite new, well, they're not really new anymore, but my favorite new comic publisher. We have the final issue of You and I #6 from J. Michael Straczynski with art from Mike Choi. You know, that trap has been set for you using the information from Isabella's uncle. So we'll see how it happens and whether or not you will survive this trap that's being laid. But I'm happy that this issue is finally coming out. I've loved this series and everything else that's come out of the Resistance universe. Moving on over to Mad Cave Studios, which is becoming my favorite new publisher. We have Gotcha Man June, Apex Heart #1. It's one of those one-shots. We had the Ken one-shot first. We now have the June one-shot written by Tommy Lee Edwards with art from Eric Canete. Again, it's just a one-shot, but we're getting these one-shots of the individual characters within the Science Ninja team that formed the Gotcha Man group. And so again, we've already had the issue with Ken when he went undercover, and now we have one with June. And then also at Mad Cave, we have Dark Empty Void #2 from writer Zach Kaplan with art from Chris Sheehan. The individual came through that black hole, warned of danger that's coming, and basically said she has to go back. I have my theories about that story. I'm hoping to speak with Zach Kaplan one day to talk about Dark Empty Void, because again, I have my theories about who the person is, and we'll see. But that's also out on this coming Wednesday. And then moving on over to Dynamite. We have Space Ghost #7, written by David Pepos with art by Jonathan Lau. And then The Terminator #2. Again, it's almost like an anthology series, but with 2 stories. The first story is written by DeClane Shelby with art from Luke Sparrow and Colin Craker. And then the backup story is written by Sal Crivelli and art from Colin Craker. Then finally, we go over to IDW Publishing. IDW has Star Trek Lower Decks. New series. It's ongoing, unlike the one-shot and miniseries that we've had in the past. However, it's going to be written by the creative team that's done the previous Lower Deck stories, which is Ryan North, with art from Derek Charm. So again, got a lot of stuff I'm going to be reading in preparation for our next episode. So it's going to be quite busy for me this week. But I'm happy to do it for you guys. I truly enjoy it. But got a whole bunch of books that I'm going to be reading. So until then, I'll see you next time. That is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Ben Comic Book Podcast. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support of the program. The Comic Ben Podcast, as well as the Comic Book Spot, are a part of the Comic Book Source family of sites and media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter X at comic_Ben, or my personal account at BatmanFan_4life. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. We're all over social media. You can also follow our sister site over at thebatmanuniverse.net for all of your news and reviews in the world of Batman. Tune in next time as we give you more in the world of comic books. Again, we truly appreciate your support. But until we meet again next time, keep reading those comics.